Greetings to you all, wherever you are on this beautiful planet. My name is Georgie Sabo. I serve as the Dean of Graduate Studies at Ubiquity University and the Wisdom School. Usually it is Dr. Jim Garrison who introduces the speaker for the Great Books course. However, he's not with us today because he's in Italy, near Milan, forging a strong collaboration with the Integral Transpersonal Institute. He will be with us next time in April. Now, does Andrew Harvey need an introduction? I believe not. But just for a few words, let me say that he is one of the greatest mystical scholars of our time. He founded the Institute of Sacred Activism. He's well-versed, knowledgeable, and have a deep insight in Sufism, Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism, Christian studies, and in the art of fine living. Now over to you, dear Andrew. Take us to the dimension of Kabir and his poems.
Oh, that is such a glorious invitation, because for me, Kabir is the essential naked pure voice that we all most desperately need to be transformed in our time. This is the voice of truth and love speaking absolutely nakedly. Kabir isn't just a poet, he's a field, he's an initiatory field. And he lived this field life in the 15th century in Benares as an illiterate peasant weaver, someone who worked all day for very little pay to feed his family, always running from the costume party of religion, running from any kind of honors, wanting to live the simple, natural, embodied, divine human life without any interference. This is totally radical, and in his own way, Kabir is as radical as Jesus, because what he's calling for is nothing less than a plunging into the naked direct connection with the one that we all are given as an original blessing. Plunging into that naked connection beyond dogma, beyond religion, beyond tradition, beyond caste, beyond anything that separates us from it and us from each other as manifestations of it. This is the truth without any sentimentality. This is the truth without any dogma. This is the truth without any religion. This is the truth. And Kabir speaks from that place and speaks of what it is required for us to live in the stream of energy and glory and beauty and power and passion and compassion of that truth. And what's required, he tells us again and again, is dying into truth, dying to the full self, dying to all illusions that prevent us from seeing reality as it really is and becoming one with reality in an act of immense devotion and immense sacred passion. And what he shows us, and this is what's so astonishing about Kabir and why I've spent 5 years plunged into him and why it gives me such joy to be offering Turn Me to Gold, 108 translations of Kabir at this moment. And what he shows us, what Kabir shows us, this illiterate peasant weaver in Benares in the 15th century, you can make up all of these kinds of codifications of Kabir, but he's so much vaster than that. What he shows us is that if you can die into reality, then what will happen to you is not simply an enlightenment consciousness. What will happen in you won't simply be an awakening to the nature of reality. It will be the activation of a process that slowly transforms you into reality itself, into a living, conscious, golden hologram of the great golden dancer that is God, the dancer of reality. And you could say something which may first strike you as really shocking, but when you truly, truly meditate on it, will open up something amazing to you and to me and to us all. He is the prophet of a transfiguration process, an engoldenment of the entire human being through divine love and wisdom, through this naked direct connection with the One. He's the prophet of this transfiguration process at a time when we all desperately need to know the map of this transfiguration process, because it's the key to what is trying to happen on the earth, which is, in my deepest knowledge, and I think I can say knowledge now, not simply the birth of a more conscious humanity, birth of a transfigured humanity, a mutated humanity, a humanity that has been through an immense dying into the immensity of infinite life, into the engoldenment process that Kabir is championing with such ecstatic clarity and violent truthfulness and sublime passion and naked, clear, transcendent awareness of all of the different realms of interconnected experience that engoldenment offers up. So in Kabir, we have something that is utterly astounding when you begin to see what majestic, universal, mystical truth was born in him, and what majestic, universal, mystical truth flashes from his words. And I'd like to just read one poem for you, Georgie, to thank you for joining me on this adventure into trying to convey the enormity of what Kabir is. And I'd like to read one of my favorite of his poems, because everything is in here, his ferocity, but also his extraordinary intense love, because his ferocity, which is extreme, is in service of an extreme love that, like Kali's extreme ferocity, is aimed at waking us up to the need for far deeper spiritual practice, and waking us up for the need for far more radical embodiment of truth and love, and waking us up for the need of truly submitting ourselves to the ecstatic rigor of a dying into life. So here it is. The Lord himself is a guest in your heart. Why are you still so desperately seeking him? Offer your whole heart to him before night darkens it. How many eons you've waited for this momentous chance. Go near now to his heart. Offer yourself selflessly. He'll give you an ocean of ecstasy and explain to you himself love's mysteries and essence. Kabir says, how could I ever express how blessed I am to have won his unshakable love? This is such a fierce, gorgeous, radical poem. He's saying directly to every human being, he's saying, the infinite is a guest in your heart. You've been given by infinite, incomprehensible grace, by the infinite, incomprehensible grace of the mystery, the guest in your heart of the entire secret, the infinite Satchitananda, the infinite divine consciousness in all of its facets. That's what's living in you. So why are you still so desperately seeking him? Why aren't you finding? Why aren't you realizing this amazing grace and doing the simple act of saying the name of God, so that that can be revealed to you, so that you can know that what I, Kabir, am saying to you is absolutely true, and it will astound you and remake you and fill you with ecstasy. But God, get to it. Don't just go on looking. Dare to find. And then he gives the perfect instruction. You can't get better instruction, more naked instruction. He says, offer your whole heart to him. That's it. Offer your whole heart to the mystery. Not just your mind, not just your will, but your heart, your deepest, most intense and intimate passion of longing. Offer that, your longing, at the deepest level of yourself, to the mystery. Give yourself mind, heart, soul, and body to the one in an ecstasy of reverence and awe and amazement and gratitude and deep, deep adoration. How many eons you waited for this momentous chance, my God, to be in a human incarnation, able to even begin to hear words like this, is to be blessed beyond imagining, because it's to be given the opportunity of liberation, of engoldenment, of being turned from a human being governed by crazy desires and ignorance into slowly a divine human being able to live consciously with the beloved in heart, soul, mind, and in the deepest cells of the burning, adoring body. And then he says, go near now to his heart. You can think for weeks about that phrase, go near now to his heart. How does one go near to the heart of the universe? This is the supremely beautiful secret at the heart of Kabir, which he can't ever express, and nobody can ever express it, except that as you grow in love, you know that love is always there trying to reach you, and that all you need always to do is to fall into the quiet of your embodied being and rest there and allow the heart's deepest longing to perfume the whole of yourself, and then turn to the one with adoration and reverence and awe and respect, with your whole being burning with longing and knowing, longing and knowing. That's how you go near now to his heart. That's the turning at the core of oneself towards the mystery. And then he says, oh, God will teach you directly what you need. You don't need middle people. You don't need gurus. You don't need anything but the relationship itself, because the relationship itself is designed by the divine beloved to give you what you need in exactly the unfolding that you most need. If humanity could get its heart around that, religious divisions would cease. There would be a direct, simple path on the earth to help people get into the depths of this transfiguration process. That simple path, that natural path, was what Kabir has created for us and what he's radiating towards us still. And that's why I'm so passionate.
And would you like to continue, or would you like me to reflect on your
Yes.
amazing book and have a few questions? Well, you know, I love your passion. I really, really love your passion. It's in all your words is feast to the mind and soul. And I
Thank you.
must say that when I received this amazing book, this is such a beautiful production, the photos and clearly the poems. I sat down and started to read it, and the poems took me into emotions of a whirlpool. And
Yes.
sometimes it was so strong that I had to get up and walk around
Yes.
and sit down again. I was addicted to it. I was addicted to finish it and really get connected with Kabir. I must say that I didn't know about him. So after I finished the book, I went onto our friend Google and researched him. But before really me asking a few questions about his
It's very
background.
hard to get a clear picture of Kabir because there have been so many biographical attempts to try and
Yes,
shape his life to fit one religion or another, or one group of
yes.
people or another. I think Kabir is as great a mystery as Jesus, actually, and Rumi, yeah, and
Oh,
Shams, especially Shams most of all, because we haven't really any idea about Kabir, but I think something is emerging that's very fierce, very radical, very funny, very that's unbelievably ferocious in its truthfulness and integrity. That's who I suspect Kabir was.
Yeah.
Yes.
But you know what was so interesting? That the first time when I opened the book, you know, there's no such thing as accident. And it's a very short poem. And when I read it,
Mm,
it was actually you came to my mind and not Kabir.
thank
And,
you.
and
Wow.
because, so this is actually on page 178. I
Oh,
am
read it.
body, so are you. What ecstasy! Join me. And I thought, this is Andrew.
Ah,
And the next thought it was that in order to be a perfect translator, you need to become of the author. Is that right?
yes.
You really became, you must have become Kabir. You were really embodied Kabir. So my first question would be that how did you change
Oh,
yourself throughout translating his poems throughout those 5 years? Tell us about your personal experiences.
well, that's such a amazing question, and I'll try and give an honest answer. But before I go on, I would never ever claim to have become Kabir, because the more I've worked with Kabir, the more immense my admiration and respect for him has become, and the more I see what a titanic Everest of a supreme mystic he is. But I can claim humbly to have been Kabirized, to having been put through a very fierce alchemical process by Kabir, in Kabir, for Kabir. And I'd love to describe that, because I think that will give people a clue as to how to approach this work. Because what you described is going through your own alchemical process as you come into connection with Kabir. Kabir is like a burning touchstone that turns you to gold, whether you like it or not. And through some pretty excruciating recognitions and acknowledgements of shadow and real honesty about addiction, all of this Kabir is very upfront about. So I really began to plunge into Kabir when I found my life changing and found that I had to and wanted to live in a log cabin in the middle of Arkansas, in the middle of fields, lost to the world, and with only deer and wild locals occasionally visiting. It was a profound solitude, and I subconsciously knew that this was exactly the right time to meet Kabir, because I was naked in this naked place, and I was alone, and I was really trying to see my life and the whole world situation as clearly as possible and without any sentimentality. So I was beginning to become naked and honest enough to be able to meet Kabir without any fantasy, without any pretension. And then I started to translate him, and through different translations and working with different translators and consulting with scholars, and he started to possess me and to take me over, so that I started writing my own poems as Kabir, which was a very strange experience. Very few of them are any good at all, but it was the experience of his voice activating this tremendous, fierce, clear voice in me that was definitely him erupting in me. So as this eruption in me continued, I continued to work on the greatest of poems that have come down to us from him, and then was guided by him to construct a way of presenting these poems as a mystical symphony, because Kabir was a musician. He sang his poems. He didn't write them down. He went into ecstasy and sang from the depths of his ecstasy. And that's how the poems exist. So it was extremely important to surrender absolutely, so as to be guided step by step as to what poems to choose, as to how to arrange them, as how the book should look. It should not look pretty. It should be raw and rough and ragged and rancid and glorious, just as naked reality is. It's got to be real. And submitting to Kabir in this way was in some ways a terrible experience, because Kabir is so naked and so honest and so utterly ruthless in the way that he exposes himself to himself, that if you read him, you get exposed to yourself. And you get exposed to your vanity, to your pride, to your lust for power, to your lust, to your crazy addictions, to your desire for celebrity, to your desire to impress people, to your terrible childhood. You get introduced without any oxygen, any anesthetic rather, to who you really have allowed yourself to become. And that for anybody is an atrocious experience, because there's nobody on the earth who really reading Kabir wouldn't just flinch in every poem from the kind of dagger that the truth is sending to your heart. So that's the first way in which reading Kabir really does change you. It really forces you. He grabs you by the back of the head and forces you to look into the mirror of your lying to yourself about yourself. Because the reality is we're all playing far too small. If we truly are the divine in a body, the beloved in a body, then why are we panicked and vulgar and greedy and selfish and competitive and stupid and insanely greedy? What the hell is going on? Why are we pretending in this particularly disgusting way? And we all are. So it's not, you don't get to a place where you are free of your shadows. You get to a place where you're much more conscious as to how those shadows are moving you and still influencing you, so much humbler before the force of the ego, which gives you a chance to start transforming the ego. Because until you've respected its power to dominate and destroy everything, you really haven't begun to know who you are up against in yourself. And believe me, Kabir will tell you. But the other amazing thing that Kabir gives is exactly the opposite. So on the one hand, he gives a sword that comes down on all of your illusions, and on the other hand, he holds out to you a golden rose saturated with the perfume of an utterly amazing transfiguration.
Mm. Mm.
What's different from Rumi is that Rumi talks about the body and clearly experiences the ecstasy of the body, but Rumi's vision is fundamentally a transcendent vision and glorious, unimaginably glorious. But Kabir's vision is the vision of engoldenment. It's the vision of a human being turning to divine human gold. It's the vision of a new race being born. He's speaking and singing and crying out and telling the truth as a divinized human being, somebody who has turned to gold.
Mm.
And this is different. This is so shocking and so demanding in the first instance, because it's asking you, can you believe something this amazing? Can you really believe it? And then can you expand enough, die enough to be able to experience the fringes of it? Because you won't be able to experience an ecstasy this vast if you've not become empty,
Mm.
because you'll not be able to even begin to hold even a fringe of that vastness in yourself.
Mm.
So when you take up Kabir's invitation, and I have taken up Kabir's invitation, because how could I avoid it? I was being slaughtered with his sword, and I was being made drunk on the perfume of the golden rose of this incredible transfiguration process. So both were happening at the same time. And
Mm.
that's how they have to happen, because that's how they're happening in the world now. We're going through a death process. It is a massive rebirth process, a massive evolutionary mutation process. And it's no coincidence that someone like myself, who is an evolutionary mystic, should now be discovering Kabir as an essential, if not the essential guide to this amazing death and transfiguration process that is now erupting as human history and is the only possible transformation of human history. How amazing. I
Oh,
found that with Rumi and now with Kabir. Rumi's the great guide to the dark night, and Kabir is the great guide to what is born out of the dark night, which is the golden Shiva, the embodied golden human divine. That's what's born. So with the two of them have the complete transmission.
Wow,
That's what I'm discovering.
that's a beautiful explanation. Thank you. I was going to ask you about what was the difference to you between Rumi and Kabir, because both of them are
Mm.
amazing messengers, and I
Yes,
realized
I
that what.
think they came together in a strange. It's so amazing, that question, because you can go in 1,000 ways with it. But I'd love to share a little bit what I feel. It's that there are three ways in which Kabir is very different from Rumi, and they're very important ways. In one way, Kabir is completely different because Rumi came from an aristocratic upper middle class, if not nobility class. So his whole being, demeanor, personality, creative personality is sublimely learned and textured and phenomenally courteous and born out of an ancient culture of courtesy, of adab. So Rumi is like Mozart, a high aristocrat of language. Kabir is a thug, an assassin of God, someone who is going to kill you with sublime bladed clarity. He's a peasant. He's not going to speak in a way that's extravagant. He's going to use whatever he can to get the truth through to every single human being nakedly, clearly, simply. It's amazing what the transfigured peasants have done in history. Jesus was a transfigured peasant. Ramakrishna was a transfigured peasant. And it seems that the people who are selected for the most important roles of bursting through are nearly always from that class of real people who really face real life without any decoration, any mask, any fantasy. We need that voice now because it is the raw, pure, naked truth. That's the first thing. The second thing is that Rumi's poetry, and this is of course part of the first, is that Rumi's poetry is phenomenally rich, unbelievably perfumed, aromatic, musky. It's the most impassioned, juicy, naked, sacred poetry ever imagined. It is like it's if the bride in the Song of Songs just got drunk and spoke for 20,000 lines. That's Rumi's poetry. It's the most beautiful, holy poetry of divine love ever written. But Kabir's poetry is totally different because Kabir is not leading with Jamal, not leading with tenderness, not leading with aromatic adoration. Kabir is leading with truth. He's saying we're in a blazing fire, we're in Kali Yuga, we're destroying everything, we're being destroyed by our own folly and ignorance and separation and cruelty and insane delusion. And we have to wake up. And we have to wake up fast because the house is burning and it's burning down. And if you stay in it in a coma, you're going to get burnt to death. That's Kabir. And we're living in a time where we don't need any more mystical seduction. We need a voice that says, you have to learn how to die into truth so that this great mutation of evolutionary truth can happen because it's the only way forward for the human race. Otherwise it's extinction and madness and chaos beyond imagining with suffering beyond imagining. So get with the real program. That's Kabir.
Mm.
And the third reason why he's so different is that reason that I just pointed to, and that is that Rumi does describe a transfiguration process, but it's one that ends with the transfiguration of the mind and the heart and the will. It doesn't go down into the depths of the cells of the body. It stops at the gates of that radical transformation. That's how I read him, and it may be that I'm missing something, and I'd love to be missing something. But in Kabir, there is that plunge into the cells, into the radical depths of matter. Kabir knows something, and that is that when one drop, as he says, of divine love touches your mind and heart and soul and body, you begin to turn to gold. And that doesn't mean just that your consciousness becomes enlightened. It doesn't mean just that your heart is expanded into a great, wild, pulsing, sacred heart. It means that the divine light comes down into the depths of your cells, or arises as a kundalini from the depth of the Muladhara, the central, middle, the bottom chakra. It's an either up-down process or an down-up process, but it is the process of mutation. And when you enter into that field of transfiguration, you meet Kabir. That's where he lives. That's who he is. That field that is killing us to rebirth us, that is stripping us of all illusions to give us the naked truth of the reality that can transfigure us.
Mhm. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I
Well,
must.
thank Kabir. I mean, this is really astonishing when you see it. It's very, that's been the great, you said, how does he change me? Well, he's given me this vision out of our relationship.
Yeah.
That's how he's changed me. What
Well,
have you
and
been
thank you for
given?
explaining your difference between Rumi and Kabir, because I really resonate with your opinion. To me, Kabir is metaphysical, spiritual. He's got a clear, blunt message, right?
Yes,
He's not playing on your emotions. He just, there you go. This is it. You know,
that's
run
it.
with it. And also what I loved so much reading his poems, that he really paints an amazing image with words, but the image
Yes,
is very subjective, because it's like a great art. You know, when you see a great art, yeah, that's another question of what great art and what art means to you. But when art actually questions you, and
yes.
and there is one poem which is on page
I
100.
love what you said. When art actually questions you, it has to be so alive to be so alive that it can question you. And Kabir is questioning
Oh,
us
absolutely.
all the time, isn't he?
Yes, and so this I want to ask your subjective interpretation of this poem. The street of love is narrow,
Mm,
two can never fit.
mm.
When I was, I wasn't. Now he is, I am not. What does
Wow.
it mean? Because I was like, I
That
read it like
is, how
10
could you put
times.
what that means into words? But I'll give a try, because you're asking me, as the knowledge of the beloved grows, you realize that you're coming to a place where you're going to drown completely in what you are in love with.
Mm,
You're coming to a place of that darkness that Ricebrook speaks of, in which lovers lose themselves.
mm,
And anything less than that place is still your own fantasy, your own illusion, because you still believe you exist.
mm,
But when love has opened you enough and given you enough courage, it opens its vastness to you, and you're given a choice. Are you going to go on holding back, observing, or are you going to plunge on into the boiling darkness and be
mm,
annihilated, and
mm,
trust that through that death you will be reborn as a different you,
mm,
and you will.
mm, mm, mm,
And he's saying, if you are at all real in your search, you must know by now that you are headed towards death. You're going to die in that alley where you meet the beloved, because the
mm,
beloved is an assassin of light,
mm,
an assassin of beauty, an assassin of identity. Who the hell do you think you are when you see the beloved naked? You won't exist. You won't exist. A candle doesn't exist before the blazing noon sun,
mm.
right?
Hmm. Thank you. I felt something similar too. That it was how many times we hear or read that when you fall in love with somebody, you actually fall in love with yourself, really, because the other
Right.
reflects of you. So you fall in love with that, and you become the two becomes one, and that is what Kabir says as well.
Well, it's also, I think, that, but also that the realization of reality is so shattering that all idea that you exist is annihilated.
Mm, mm,
Because when you begin to glimpse what reality is as you grow in the mystical path, you are so humbled by awe and crushed, really crushed in your self-esteem by the immensity of what you're being privileged and graced to glimpse.
yeah.
How could you possibly keep up any pretensions after such an experience?
Yeah. Now, Andrew, my other question, I'm intrigued by the translation process, because we know that Tagore translated some of Kabir's poems and
Yes,
other people.
beautifully.
So how was your translation process progressing, and how did you find, because you did mention at the beginning of your book that you translated from different languages and you used
Yes.
some help as well. So tell us a little bit about it. How was that?
Well, it's a very difficult process to describe. That for this reason is that not everybody agrees on what Kabir's authentic poems are, because there are hundreds and hundreds of poems that have been associated to Kabir, but most of them, it now appears, are later variations by other poets who just used his name as a way of getting their linked vision across. They were Kabirized and they wrote Kabir poems. So the first thing I did was to really explore the whole literature and take the advice of the most radical and most intelligent scholars I could, and those are Linda Hess and Charlotte Vaudeville, two amazing women scholars who really have looked at the Kabir legend, declared a lot of it legend, and really found the radical, incendiary, perpetually independent Kabir that I believe is the authentic Kabir, because the most revolutionary. So that helped me, guided by them, to find the 400 poems that really expressed this outrageously fierce and naked and holy personality that is Kabir, this swordsman of truth. And then what I did was to talk to scholars who know the Hindi better, know the language that he wrote in better, and get competing, very clear translations of them, because I wanted these translations to be ice clear. I wanted them to be naked. I didn't want there to be anything between the language and the truth expressed in the language. And then I worked from different potential translations in French and Italian and German, because these poems, the ones I chose, have been sometimes translated, sometimes not, but quite often in one or other of those languages. And then I would really work on a version that met my own inmost criterion, based on my own inmost experience of Kabir. And that means that I would work for the fiercest clarity, the most naked truth, the most gorgeous images, and the most naked voice, because that's Kabir. It has to be naked, naked, naked. So that's the process. It was a very rich process. And I have to say that that's a process that, while being real, is a little too clear, because what was going on underneath that process was that Kabir was tearing my life apart and opening me up and guiding me through deeper and richer versions of the process. So I did my bit and turned up in this complex way, but far more importantly, Grace was tearing me and opening me and rebirthing me to help me present Kabir beyond anything that my sublime,
Mm,
silly intellect could come up with.
mm. And tell us about who is Brett Hurd, because if you have the book, you see these really beautifully amazing
Oh,
photos of
yes.
scenes. How did you select his photos, and who is he? Tell
Ooh.
us a little bit about him.
Well, he's a beloved friend of mine. He's a wonderful, very, very gifted young Canadian photographer. I think he's 30 now. I met him when he was 28, when he was part of a television crew that was making a film on the White Lions in South Africa.
Mm,
And I liked him immensely. He has a tremendous depth of soul and earnestness, and he's very funny. And I really loved being with him. And then I saw his photographs, and I was stunned by them. I was stunned by their fierceness, their rawness, the pain in them, and the capacity to stare directly at reality.
mm,
So I thought, my God, wouldn't it be amazing if this young millennial photographer, gifted in this astonishing way, came to India and really looked at Benares for the first time? That's what happened. I took him to Benares, to Varanasi, Kabir's city, and I just turned him loose. And he'd never been to India before. And what he was able to see with the kind of fierce, solid, naked strength that he has within himself are these tremendous images of Benares, which make the book something far more than an illustrated book of divine poetry. It's actually a sacred book. It's an illuminated manuscript, but it's illuminated by these black and white, raw, fierce photographs of the truth of reality, which is how Kabir would have wanted it. Kabir would not want a pretty book. He'd want a totally insane, raw, real, gorgeous, painful, beautiful, holy book,
mm.
the book of reality itself in Benares. And that's what I believe Brett has been able to capture. I'm so proud of him.
He's super talented. And how did you choose the marriage of the particular poems and the photos? Did you choose it
I
together? Or?
did. I actually know I chose it myself because he trusted me. I said to him, look, what I believe is going to happen when all the photographs are in and all the right order of the poems is in. I think we're going to be shown very, very simply what needs to go where, because there's been a dance between the image and the poem from the very beginning in our friendship and in the way in which you approach Benares and in all this that we lived. So he trusted me, and I really saw very simply and quickly what poems needed what visual accompaniments, because the photographs act as raw comments on the poems, and you can find when you dive into the poetry that the image, which may seem at the first glance strange to you, is actually something that's leading you deeper into what you're feeling about the poetry and showing you something strange from reality itself about this reality that the poetry is opening up. So I was very excited about arranging the book like that. And there are many things that I loved, special favorites that I have, but my favorite one is about towards the end when there is where Kabir is talking about the magician, the divine as the magician, Maya as the great magic, and that
Mm,
all human beings are complete idiots in the face of this magic. And then there's a photograph of four white horses, I think, or two white horses
two.
drinking from a
Yeah, this
white.
one.
This one is such an insane photograph. There's a tub in the middle of the road, and these two glorious, insanely beautiful white horses in the middle of a squalid street in India. That's Maya. That's the magic of the divine, and there you have it in raw life. And so there are many things like that in the book if you look. So the book itself becomes Kabir's way of communicating absolute truth beyond words, which is so thrilling to me. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, now, before turning to our attendees, I'd like you to read a poem to me. I'd like to hear your own voice. And
Oh,
this is 190, page 190. I have many favorites throughout in this book, but this is
oh, I'll love to read this to everybody. This is really such a sublime prayer. It's the prayer of our situation. It's the prayer of the birth. It's the prayer that I hope, will all be more completely praying as we come to understand what Kabir is saying and living and what we can live. So here it is. Let there be your love, Lord, burning softly in every cell of my dying and transfigured body. By your wild and merciful grace, Lord of truth, turn me to gold so I can love in perfect fullness, you who loves in me.
Oh.
But I would love to just dive a little bit into that poem and then perhaps just read it once more so that people can realize just what an extraordinary statement it is. And it is. He's really saying, I want to die into your love. Let there be your love, Lord, burning softly. Not my love, even, not even my adoration for you, but only your love, which means that I cease to exist and you live in me. That's how outrageous those first lines are. And he takes that burning of love even more deeply than any other mystic has, in my experience, taken it, because he says it must burn not only in the mind and in the heart, but in the cell, in every cell of my dying and transfigured body. Imagine for a moment what you might feel if every cell of your body, every cell of your bones, every cell of the marrow of your bones was consciously burning in bliss through extreme love, inhabiting you on every level. That's what he's speaking of, as far as it can be spoken of. And then he turns to the one who is doing this in him, through him, to him, and he says, by your wild and merciful grace, by this insanely paradoxical system you've set up of dying and rebirth, annihilation and transfiguration, by your wild and merciful grace, this absolutely unknowably ferocious and glorious process that is your evolutionary transformation. And by the grace of that, turn me to gold. I know I am being engolden, but put me through whatever I have to be put through to be gold, to be your gold. And then that amazing last verse, which is so much at the heart of this birth that's trying to happen. He says, so I can love in perfect fullness you who loves in me. That is so amazing. He's saying, what I want to do is to love with my whole mind and heart and soul and every cells of my body. I want to be able to love so much that I and my love totally cease to exist. So only your love can live and burn in me, because that's the only way that I could ever love you enough, is by dying into you, being me, being you. Wow.
Thank you, dear Andrew. Thank you.
It's so amazing.
It is really. It's. Thank you for giving birth to this wonderful book.
Well,
And
let's thank him. Let's thank him for having taken this journey and made it available to us again at this moment when we so need it. I need it, and I know everybody I know needs it. This is mountain water from the top of Everest.
Mount Kailash, definitely.
Yeah,
Now
right. Yes.
over to you, dear listeners. If you would like to ask a question or comment on Andrew's presentation on his book, please put your hand up. And Raffaello, when Georg opens your audio, then you will need to press join audio on your screen. Yes, we can hear you. Wonderful. Thank you.
Hi, Raffaello.
Hello, Andrew. Thank you so much. I am excited, alive with this kind of like nectar from Kabir, that it's like I don't know, I had only tasted something similar in some, you know, random poem by Rilke or by Mumon from,
Oh,
you know, Chinese
yes, well,
tradition.
yes, they are the great ones. Yes, but
So,
Kabir's the big potato. Get to him,
yeah,
you'll love
so
it.
feeling the hot potato in my hand, and also I realized that, you know, any question, this is what I realized as I was thinking about what I want to ask, is that any question about what Kabir is saying is already getting us to a different level of separation and duality,
That's it.
blah, blah, blah.
Absolutely.
So with that humbleness still, I will, you know, give it a try.
Well, let's do it.
Thank you. Because when I was reading now, I was about halfway the book, and I was impacted by some verses where he seems to refer to the very personal love between humans, to human relating. I have it here, like there is one poem, just 2 or 3 verses, where he says, your father and mother claim you as their son, but they rear you for their own agenda. Your mistress claims you're her beloved, and like a tigress longs to eat you up. All of that.
It's tremendous stuff, isn't it? It's Kabir knows the delusion of the ego. Kabir knows what life really is like at its rawest. And what life is like at its rawest is that you wake up to being absolutely alone in a demented cinema of projections.
Great. So here's my question then. Like,
And that's what he's describing.
right. And so the question that, you know, sprung in my heart was, is he actually asking us to sever all relationships, you know, like Buddha did in his
No,
own time?
no.
Or
That's what's so outrageous about him. I think he's asking two things and related things. They seem totally unrelated, but they are actually two sides of the same initiation. He's asking us to see how crazy we are, that we're inmates in a lunatic asylum, and it's a very desolate asylum because we get betrayed often and we are fundamentally alone in a cinema of demented projections. That's a very ferocious kind of waking up. But also, he's trying to show us that if we die through recognizing the truth of being crazy into the mystery, we'll be able to love each other with much more refinement and tenderness and abandon and sweetness and true encouragement, because we'll be loving everyone and everything as reflections of our own essential divine self, and we'll be loving from that self more and more completely, so much more richly and tenderly. Do you want to love like Clint Eastwood in one of those Western films, or do you want to love like the Dalai Lama? Do you want to love all things at every moment with the whole of yourself, offering the whole of yourself as a prayer to others? Which way do you want? Kabir's way is the second. He wants to live a totally sacred, limitless life, radiating love to all beings. And what makes Kabir so astonishing and radical is that he is one of the fiercest, perhaps the most fierce, advocate for animal rights in all of mystical poetry. Kabir just lays it on the line and says, you cannot go on treating animals like this and claim to be religious. This has nothing whatever to do with God. Animals are totally holy. They're sacred. They have divine consciousness too. How dare you? This is amazing. If somebody was saying don't get related, why would he have cared so absolutely intensely for every single chicken and every single oxen and every single animal that he saw, every single cat and dog? Kabir was boiling with heartbreak at what we do to the animals, and really announced that if we continue to do this, we should be wiped off the face of this earth and declared complete hypocrites as far as divine love is concerned. So Kabir is actually asking us to relate in a completely different way, to stop relating from the demonic ego that wants to possess and dominate and exploit, and start relating from the self that we become when we've died to our full self. start relating from there and discover the astounding love that's at the heart of that experience, and then radiate it and enjoy it. I think that's a wonderful invitation, don't you?
I think so too. And thank you. That totally answered my question. So thank you.
Did it? Did it
Yeah,
really?
it really did. Yeah, it really did.
He's inviting you to the ecstatic love of all things through being engoldened. That's what Kabir is. And any other love is a very, why drink Coca-Cola when you can drink champagne?
For sure. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Raffaello. Thank you.
Georgie unfortunately knows which one I prefer.
That's what I meant at the beginning when I said that, the art of fine living, fine dining. Well, surely.
Fine living on a lemonade income. That's perfect. That's the perfect way. Everything in life can be an occasion for fine living.
Yeah. Thank you, Raffaello. Now, John, let's hear from you. What do you think about Kabir?
There is John.
You need to press the bottom corner. You have a join audio, the left-hand side.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Wonderful.
Yes.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate in your translation how you have captured some of the musicality. The poem you read from page 190, for example, where the word you, which is a reference to the Lord,
Yes.
gets its own line.
Yes.
So I can love in perfect fullness you. One line of the poem, the one word gets to ring out. And
Yes.
I mentioned that because I wanted to know what inspired you to organize the book into 4 symphonic movements, if you could talk about how the poetry spoke to you in a musical way.
The 4 movements are really the 4 stages that the human self goes into and through to be engoldened. So the initial stage is the stage of rapturous opening. The second stage is the stage of incarnating increasingly. The third stage is the stage of the dark night, the shattering, the annihilation. And the fourth stage is the birth, the ecstatic, emboldened, engoldened, embodied divine human birth. So that was born out of my living experience of Kabir and this message, that structure. But what I've also noticed is how in the mystical path, progress is made in spirals, in very strange, sometimes very paradoxical spirals, because you often, as you are broken open forward, you're then plunged back into a more exposed part of your own shadow.
Mm.
So I took that deep intuition and worked with the poems that belong to each of those stages and tried to create a living, wild, holy book that would take you in and give you the deepest kind of information that you would need to negotiate the expansions and contractions of the real mystical path, because it's never straight. You're going to go through all kinds of doubts and bewilderments and constrictions and heart openings and ordeals, and Kabir is very honest about them. So I wanted to construct something that would be itself the revelation of the teaching. The teaching wouldn't only be in the poems, it would be in the relationship of the poems to each other and in the enormous, strange impact from every side that really reading the poems in the order that they are given will give anybody. So it's my attempt to, in a musical way, transcend language while using language to baptize you in this greater, wilder music that is Kabir. Kabir is really the silence from which Kabir comes, and that's what the musical structure is designed to initiate you into.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Does that help?
Yes, very much. I do have one other question, if I might.
Please.
In the very beginning, you talked about offering your heart and how clear he makes it, how naked the truth is. And yet, so it seems so elegantly simple.
Yes.
Why is it so hard for us to do? Why is it so hard for us to lose the ego when it seems like we build the temples up, right? And we go out and we look for the outside inspiration, but it's the turning in, the giving up the body, offering the dying inside to it. Why can't we? It seems so simple, but it's so hard.
I hear you, and I understand why you're saying it like that. But I would invite you to do something very revolutionary right now and stop saying that it's so hard. Because by continuing to say how hard it is, you are giving yourself excuses for not being in love right now with
You're seeing right
everything.
through me.
I'm seeing right through myself. I've done that so often. So I'm just offering you another way, and that is to just arrive in love every moment through saying the name of God or through whatever technique works best for you, because you have to get to the place in your life where you just are so bored by all of your excuses for not being in love that you decide to just fall in love raggedly, imperfectly, hopelessly, stupidly. It really doesn't matter, because you're bound to be crazy for most of the path that follows, but just be crazy for the right beloved. That's all.
I will be bored by my excuses.
Be bored by them and realize that it is just a heartbeat away, this love. It's you saying right now, I love you. I have no idea who you are, what you are, but I love you. I love you. And you're just feeling that. If you say the name, it's even more amazing. I say Om Namah Shivaya or La ilaha illallah, because I'm saying with my whole being, I love you. I revere you. You are reality. That's all you need to do to feel love burning inside you. It really is. So why waste your whole life giving yourself excuses for not falling in love with love when you can do it so simply right now and have the experience? God's waiting every moment for this.
I hear you. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me say it to you, because it's so important. We stop. We box ourselves into a narrative, which then becomes our reality, and that's one of the most appalling ways in which illusion works. And the reality is that joy is around us at every moment, and we can connect with it at every moment if we just silence our negative, false self.
Thank you.
What wise message. Thank you so much. And then thank you, John, for the great question and for
amazing question. Wonderful.
So candid and so open. Now let's hear from Laura Medzen.
I'm hearing you now. I'm delighted.
Yeah, thank you. This is so beautiful. And
well, I have beautiful people here. Look at this. This is a wonderful group.
I really loved your introduction. Like I felt right. I couldn't read anymore after I read your introduction. Like I had to stop there because I felt.
Thank you.
I felt so much in your introduction. And one of the things, the fierce temperature of his truth, and you talked about Kabir as the universal initiatory field.
Yes.
And that resonated so deeply for me. I feel that's the territory we're entering into as more and more of us say yes to this divine impulse that is fierce. I studied a bhakti tradition. Then you're reminding me so much. You probably don't, they weren't well known. Lee Lozowick and the Baul.
Yes, of course, I knew about Lee, absolutely.
Well, I followed that tradition for almost a decade.
Wow,
And
a fierce tradition, real burning, yes.
Real burning, a devotional.
Yes.
It makes me think of the three faces of God, and his was the devotional I thou, and it was transformational. I had mystical experiences. I had literally darts going in my heart.
Like Kabir himself, that's how he describes it at one place. Absolutely, yes.
Yes, and so I feel that's not a popular method. That's why I think they weren't.
Well, the modern spirituality is degenerate. It's entirely, it's very narcissistic. What's peddled out there is mindfulness and staying calm and peaceful. Well, that's just the beginning of authentic spirituality. The real path is the path of love, because it's the path that destroys and rebirths, and all other paths don't involve such a sacrifice of your own ego. Only love can draw you to that place where you're prepared to die into truth out of sheer overwhelming passion for the beloved.
Yeah, it's like the sort of modern platform is very anemic.
Anemic, it's corporate sponsored. It doesn't want people to discover the revolutionary power that comes from this path. Yeah. And Kabir knew that, and that's when he knew that that's what the religions were about, was actually containing the nuclear force of transformation in their own traditions. So he was determined to spring it free so it could work its wild octane way through humanity.
So beautiful. And I love how you talk about he wasn't just interested in the mind and heart, but the whole cellular level. That's why he can be that initiatory field, because it's a
vibrant... Yes, because he experienced what it is to be a lover. He says, look, anything less than being a lover is a complete waste of time on this path. Don't bother. And he asked the question again and again, it seems, what is it to be a lover? Is it just to have these vague thoughts in your vaguely illumined mind? Is it to have a few wonderful emotions for life? Is it to dance to Tina Turner? What the hell is it to be a lover? And the answer that he comes to is that being a lover is burning with longing in every single part of you to be one forever with the beloved. That's being a lover. That's what it really means. And when you begin to experience that or even imagine it, you realize, oh my God, if you're really going to burn in longing, in the fires of longing, you're going to be consumed by the beloved. The beloved's going to eat you up. You're not going to be left anything of you. You're going to be subsumed and consumed and annihilated and reborn. That's true.
Yeah. Well, my life's never been the same since.
How could it be? No, it's not the same life. Are you kidding? One was in black and white, and this is in color, right?
Yeah. So bless you for what you're offering here, Andrew. It's so needed. I just go, wow.
It's so needed, because we've got to get out of our heads. We've got to get out of an anemic spirituality. We've got to get down with the dying into life, and we've got to allow the engoldenment process to engolden us so we can become brave and splendid and exuberant and passionately energetic enough to do something real together about what's actually now threatening our survival. That's why it's so important. That's why
so well said. I love how you can string words together and just like, oh my God, I'm sorry I didn't get that written down, you know?
Well, I don't string them together. They string me together. That's what I...
I think your words are transmission, actually, Andrew.
I hope so. By now, I'm trying to make them, because, my God, anything you can transmit at this moment is worth it.
Absolutely. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Laura, for your contribution. Now, is there anybody else? I'm calling on our fine degree students and attendees. Vivian.
Such wonderful questions. God.
Don't be shy. Well, we have another another session next month, but I understand that. Oh, Paolo, wonderful.
So I'll be short. I'm very grateful to be here, to be reading this wonderful collection of poems, and to being here today with all of you. Two very simple questions. One is, how did you come across Kabir in the first place? And there's the question.
That's a lovely question.
And the second question is, what is the essence of wisdom in life from your learnings from experiencing Kabir?
Two very simple questions.
Yeah, the second one is maybe a bit.
I love what you call simple. Thank you, Paolo, very much. I first met Kabir in a really amazing way, actually. And I'm so grateful I didn't know anything about him before I met him, because it was sufficiently shocking to start this obsession. I was 26. I was in Benares visiting this holy city, and I was in a temple, and an old man came in and started singing ecstatically and just burnt down my world by the passion of his singing. This wild old man, half naked, singing. I didn't understand what he was singing. I caught certain words, and I went up to him and said, "What were you singing, sir? Please, thank you, thank you." And he said, "I'm singing Kabir, of course." Kabir, what else? And I thought, well, I should find out what this Kabir is. And I found the Tagore translations that Evelyn Underhill helped him with, and that was the beginning. But that was how I met him. I met him as an explosion in a temple, an explosion of ecstatic truth and joy. So the second question, what is wisdom to me at this moment? I think wisdom is abiding in spacious consciousness as far and as deeply and as richly as possible. Really trying to live in embodied divine consciousness so that you can relate to whatever's being asked of you or whatever's happening with as deep and subtle a poise and truth as possible. That is wisdom. It's not a revelation of knowledge. It's far more than that. Wisdom is a revelation of presence.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you, Paolo.
Thank you.
Now we have Vivian. Vivian is our master's student, and she's coming to Chartres. So
can you hear me?
We can hear you, but we can't see you. We can only see some parts.
I am a mess, so I'm going to let you just look at the pictures of my mother, and I'll flash it up real quick and show you that I really am a mess. So say I'm a mess.
You're not. You're beautiful.
You're beautiful, Dani.
Oh, thank you. So my question that I have is, I'm leaving tomorrow. You have no idea how appropriate that this is for me to be listening to this today. I'm leaving tomorrow.
Oh, I'm so glad.
And to work with Al Gore's group, the Climate Reality Project, as a mentor, which I've done since 2007.
Oh, thank you,
and the thing that the poem that really struck me was on page 20, and it has the hunger for the fruits of action. It's just threw me to the ground. You'll end up a slave of bondage. And
yes.
Living in this world, and I hope I don't cry, but that's what I've been doing the whole time you've been speaking. So that's why I'm a mess. It's this, this dichotomy of, how do we not be of action? And all my fellow environmentalists are always about, oh, I'm the better environmentalist than you are, etc. And it's this game. And it's like, you have no, and I'm going to cuss, fucking idea what you're talking about. We are at an existential crisis, and where it's not a competition to see who dies first, right? So that's my first question is, will you talk about the action? And the second is the 108, and did you come about that by, why did you choose 108 poems?
Well, 108 is the sacred number of the East.
Right.
And it's a number that I love because it's sufficiently vast and also it's got a limit. So I thought, if I can't choose 108 totally different but totally interrelated poems and can't choose them in a totally interrelated way, then I shouldn't do this book at all. I should wait until I could get to that place, and I did. And I think that's what's actually
beautiful.
Happened in the book. I think the best way of truly answering your question about action is about inviting you to contemplate the nature of God, to start by that. Because what we are truly trying to become as human beings is living mirrors of that reality. That's how we would learn to act most powerfully, because if we act divinely from a divine center, then it will have divine blessing and divine power. It won't be contaminated by ego. So when you contemplate eternal reality, you see that eternal reality has two fundamentally different, interrelated, paradoxically separated but united qualities, and that is the great peace, fathomless peace, and absolutely ceaseless, radical, transfiguring energy. So what comes out of that questioning of eternal reality is that you glimpse a state in which you could be at once profoundly peaceful, surrendered, at home with whatever arises, and profoundly alert and committed to doing whatever you can with your own inspired gifts to be of help. And what you're glimpsing in that marriage is enlightened activity, which is what is the answer to your question. What is the true action? It's an action that contains an inaction.
Right. That's the divine, I call it divine intervention,
Well, it's divine surrender. It's based in surrender.
Yeah.
And it's grounded in peace, and it's spacious, and it's awake and alert to the divine self in the person and in everything around you. And then the action that's born out of that is born out of profound wisdom and responsiveness. It's not governed by the ego. It's not governed by merely by outrage. It's governed by wisdom.
Yeah, I'm going back to John. How come it's so hard? Why is it so hard? It's not. It's not hard. It's not hard. I'm going to surrender to it. I got it.
I think it's hard because we are so addicted to the drama.
Yeah,
and
it is.
You
but
presented it extremely
dramatic.
and you're right, it is a drama. But if you're going to get trapped in that drama, you can go on screaming and shouting forever. You'll never get to the place where you just surrender right now and say, act through me.
I glimpse it for seconds at a time. I do. I have. And I want to get back there. And I think that's the, I feel like I'm, treading water to get back there all the time. But it's like you said, just surrender to it, and it's going to help. Reading this, so I'm going to read it 108
more serious
times.
than you think. You see, I mean, if you still think that there is something to be gained from this drama of yours. Sweetheart, I do. I mean, I understand it, but it's much too late for that. We have to be stable. We have to be luminous. We have to be radical. We have to be totally present. We have to be in the self, not in the human ego, to be able to even begin to imagine whatever action could be of any use in a crisis so intense and so extreme. There is no other option when you see it.
No,
so to be doing anything else is absolute waste of time. It's a waste of time to be paralyzed. It's a waste of time to be in magical thinking. It's a waste of time to think that we're going to get through without anything less. It's a waste of time to be dramatic about it. We've just got to do it. That's all. Let's do it.
So this year they're embracing the Reverend Barber is coming to speak. So they're pulling in to the South, this whole thing, the moral action on climate. So
right.
I'm going with the sacred activist, talking about this, trying to
It's
bring
got
this
to be
language.
far more than the moral attitude. It's got to be the ecstatic, mystical attitude. We are in love with the creation and our heart is shattered and we don't want any of this butchery to continue because it's butchering us and ensuring.
So how do we take this into the mainstream, though? That's my point. That's my action. That's what I'm struggling with. Is I want you to be talking
don't take it. Don't think about taking it into the mainstream. Think about first, are you really authentically modeling it yourself? That's the first question. Don't play Oprah. Don't be Oprah-fied. So that the first question is, how do we get a message which you're not embodying yet intensely enough out into the mainstream? So the first thing is to embody the message. You can do this. I know you. I'm a huge fan of yours. I know that if you just sober up and get focused, you can stand up there and lead people into places that they didn't know that they could go because they trust your reality as I trust your reality. So go deep in prayer, go deep in contemplation, let all of the drama go, focus yourself completely, and then lead people into the depths of heartbreak where they discover their true sacred mission. And just do it naturally and you'll get away with it. I've gotten away with it. Why wouldn't you?
I don't know. I'll try it. It's a worthy goal.
And you're perfect for it because you've got a huge broken heart.
Oh, Saint Genevieve up on Mount. Yeah, I remember that, and I keep thinking that's the divine intervention I'm speaking of. So yeah,
just follow that broken heart. It will lead you to truth.
Okay, cool.
That's it.
I've rearranged my entire life to do this. So yep.
And the whole universe is rearranging all of our entire lives.
They are. It is. Something is afoot. There's definitely something afoot. Are you kidding?
This great transformation is not going to let anybody rest until we all.
You're absolutely right. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for this work. I think it's going to illuminate a lot of people and turn me to gold.
My great pleasure. What more could I possibly want to do than to hang out with people like you? Thank you.
Thank you, Vivian. Really, really appreciate.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, before we conclude this session, I think it's fair enough that we hear from Andrew and Kabir. And I've chosen a poem.
Oh,
Andrew, would you please read it? And I will leave it up to you if you'd like to offer any of your comments and reflections. If you just would like to leave it as it is, then that would be the greatest. So please turn to 84, page 84. Oh. Actually, 82. Sorry. 82.
I love 84. Oh, this is beautiful.
Please.
Yeah. This is for you, Georgie. Thank you for this amazing hour and for all of you who have asked such extraordinarily powerful and helpful and truly important questions. Thank you. It's been wonderful to be with you. Of this body, I'll make a lamp, and of my soul, burning with longing, a wick, and for oil, I'll fill the lamp with my tears of blood, and by its light, I'll see the face of my beloved.
Thank you. Thank you, dear Andrew, for sharing your wisdom, knowledge, and Kabir with us.
It's my great joy.
See you in a month's time. See you all in a month's time.
Hey, see you soon.
Bye-bye.